If you own one of these or you've ever been a passenger on one of these, there's one thing that you've either said or heard, and that's you have to slam the door. Most people, they close it like that. It's not closed all the way. We don't have soft closed doors. You actually do have to kind of put some effort, follow through a little bit, and then it'll close. We don't like that, so we're going to put soft closed doors on here. And these are the latches. We've got one for each side, and this is what's actually going to pull the door in. This does not go in the door, it goes on the body side. So we've got to take apart a few things, and these will actually plug directly into the factory wiring. This cable will not be used because this actually goes to a Tesla Model X. Did not buy genuine McLaren parts. These don't even say Tesla anywhere on them, but you can use these from a Tesla Model X. The wiring's the same, plug is the same, and we're going to use the cables that go into the doors as they are in there. We're not going to reroute them or anything. We're just going to disconnect from the inside and use those. The passenger side should go straight in. The driver's side, however, has two cables that go in. One for the manual key that's hidden, and the other for the normal mechanism for the pull on that. And for that, we're going to have some modification to make, and I don't exactly know what I have to do that yet. I'm going to learn along with you. So I'm going to show you the step-by-step of how to do this complete installation. Inside on the passenger side, the latch is on the back side of here. So we got to get behind this panel to get to everything. And right here is the manual release. And that's what that cable is for. So in the event that you don't have any power, this latch can still operate by pulling on this release. So we've got to make sure that that is working. And we're going to remove this panel. If you haven't already noticed, step one is going to be moving the seat all the way forward to get it out of the way. If you can't manage that, this is probably not the job for you. But we are going to take this panel out. This is one separate piece. We've got the trim up here. There are clips on the back. This is kind of a flimsy panel. You want to be very careful with how you're pulling on it. You can see there's one other clip right here that did get pulled off, so we're going to pull that out. But from this point, we've got our cable, and we've got to take the seat belt assembly loose to get to the back side of that. As it turns out, we've also got to remove this panel that goes all the way to the back wall. And this is actually clipped into this bracket where the seat belt is. Now, once we get this out of here, we need a 17 millimeter and a 13 millimeter, 17 up here and 13 down here, and we can take this entire bracket out. You may have noticed the camera got knocked. This centerpiece has to come out first. There are pins in it, one of them stuck in there, but this panel has to come out first before this. Not a big deal. It started to pull out as soon as I pulled this loose. But here's what we're left with, and now we can take the bracket off. There actually is a fourth bolt at the bottom of the seat belt bracket. Now, I've decided to not take this bolt out just because I like not taking out bolts that I don't have to, especially this one being safety related. I don't know what the torque spec is supposed to be, so I'm going to leave it in so it can't be the wrong torque going in, and I know this is definitely going to be safe. Once you get in here, it has some foam kind of sticky stuff. There's just a plastic panel, but all that stuff you just got to peel back, and that's what holds this in. And we're going to get this panel out. On this side of things, we've got a 4mm bolt, 3 of those to get the latch out. And using a T-handle is really going to help here because you're going to need quite a bit of torque. It'll stand away from the body, so I recommend using one of these. We're going to take these 3 screws out, and then I think from the backside we'll be able to pull it out. Now, I was able to get this plug out. There's a red slide on the plug that you can't really see in there, but you have to slide it out first. That's what keeps it locked. Then I was able to push right there, and with one finger I can just push it and then just slide it right off. You have to get that plug off to get this out, and I did find that it was a little bit easier to do that after you loosen the latch, get all the bolts out of it, let it slide downward. Then you don't have to use this. This I couldn't really get in there. But you can slide the whole latch downward and actually get your whole hand in there to really fool with it. So once you get that unplugged, this whole thing comes out pretty easily. And now we've got to take this cable and get it out of here. So we got to take this apart to do that. All right, there are 3 screws, 1, 2, and 3. Those are all Phillips head. Once you get those out, you can take this panel off. Here's what you're left with, and we've got to get this cable disconnected and pull this through to put it on the new latch. Now, to make the cable accessible by taking the old one out to be able to put the new one in, we've got to take these 4 screws out. And they are a T9. We'll take this loose. We can get this cable off, free it up, put the other one in, slide this bad boy right in. Now, this little sleeve you want to make sure you don't lose because it can come out. And that's what drives this mechanism right here. Now, if you're unsure which one you're dealing with, they are labeled left hand and right hand. And if you have a left-hand drive or right-hand drive, that's obviously going to be different, which is why it's not driver's side or passenger side. Now, the left-hand side is the one that's going to be tricky with 2 cables, regardless of which side of the car you're driving on. So we're going to get this hooked into place. And it helps if you actually spin this around 180 degrees, then it'll slide in, twist it around. Same thing goes for taking it back off. That slides right into there. And now we can take this whole assembly and put it back together. If you can't get the little sleeve to go right back on, give it a little twist before you try sliding this in, and eventually it'll go. As you can tell, this rubber piece will not fit directly back over it, but you can get it kind of close. And now we're ready to slide this guy back in, plug in the electrical plug, and mount it back up. And as it turns out, my old latch has actually been replaced before, and everything was kind of bound up. So we can actually plug this in outside. Now there is another plug for the sensor for locking that's down in here, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to disconnect that, so that's out of the way. That makes it pretty free and clear. I've already done that, but you'll want to make sure you plug that back in or you'll lose that function. So I've got the cable moved over. I've torn off all this extra rubber. It was just getting in the way, it's being a pain. Now, this is where you learn from my mistake. They are labeled left hand and right hand. However, on this car, you have to do the opposite. So LH goes on the right side, RH goes on the left side. When you do that, it'll go right in. If it's not going in, it's because you did what I did initially here, and you have it to where you think it'll bolt up, but it physically will not go. There's a bracket that gets in the way. You know it's in the correct way if the cable is on top. If it's on the bottom, you put the wrong one in. Now putting these bolts back in the front, only put them in very loose, all three of them, until you get everything lined up, because if you get one tight, it might not let another one go back in. So get all three of them loosely in, then go back, torque it down, plug in the plug. Don't forget about the other plug that was unplugged for the other sensor, and put this panel back in and the seat belt back in. Okay, some notes on getting this all back together. Obviously, you've already got these secured. That's good to go. Something that I didn't notice before is there's a yellow plug right there on the seat belt. You're going to want to unplug that. I didn't. I had to fix it. So make sure you unplug that before you unbolt any of this. That way you will not damage that. Additionally, you want to make sure you feed the cable for your manual release on the inside edge here, not on the outside. So when you're going, fighting this a little bit, because there's the shroud on the cable, make sure you have it come out this direction. And if you're having a hard time getting this to come in, try twisting this. Just put a little bit of pressure right there, twist it, it'll slide right in. Then you can put this back through the panel, put the panels back in, and then we'll go to the other side. And I'll take it apart the same way. I'm not going to put you through all that. But if something is different, or when something gets to the different point, then I will show you what is different. And now the moment of truth. With all this back together, pulls it right in. Other on the left side, we've got two cables. One of these goes to the key, which is actually this bottom one, the hidden key point, the actual manual key, and the other one goes to the manual release. And as you can tell, we only have one spot to connect this in. On this, if you had a genuine McLaren part, it would have both. Now, I've looked at this and I've tried to think of a way that I can make a bracket to make both of these work and that kind of thing. The only place you can attach to is down here at the bottom. And I figured if I spent enough time, I could figure out a way to make a part that would go in there, maybe weld a piece in, but I'd have to figure out how to get both of these on there okay and still be able to remove both of them if need be. And that's going to take a lot of time, and both of these are temporary problems. Neither of these are going to be used possibly ever I've never used the key slot, and I have never used the manual release. So maybe they'll never be used. So what I have decided to do is only use one of these, and the one that I have chosen is the key slot. Now the reason being, if for some reason the battery dies, if you've got the software update, the window should roll down to where it won't break if you open it with the manual key, which is up in there. So I'm more likely to have to need to use the manual key than I am the manual release. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe you're in a wreck. Maybe it's disabled to where you don't have power. That's what the other door is for. The other door still has the manual release. So if that's what it came down to, I didn't have the window down, I could still use the passenger door. So if there's an instance where the passenger door cannot be opened, I have no power, I can't open the driver door, in that case, you break the window from the inside. Odds are it either already broke or you're in a position where it doesn't matter at that point. So there's a whole lot of what ifs to make it to where I'd have to use the manual release on the driver door a priority. So I'm not going to. I'm only going to do the key. This is still just going to float around in there. I'm just going to make sure it's connected just so it's all tidy and in there and everything's fine. But then I will put this motor back together, put everything back in, same way we took it out, just like the other side. And then we'll check this one out as well. Now I've got the other side almost completely put back together. A few notes that I'll mention. This panel, getting it back in, it's easiest if you do it this end first and then kind of work your way this way, putting it back in. Make sure that you've got all the clips in here, including the one down here that you may have pulled out. There's a plastic clip down here and another one up here. Make sure you got those. This may have come out in one piece. It can come out in one piece if you want to. You can put it back in as one piece where that goes in there, right up in there if you want to. I find it's easier as two pieces. I'm guessing that's why they designed it that way. And the other thing is this rubber panel, is you've got these little nubs that are on here. Make sure that you get those three in there as well. One of them apparently was left in there and broken off. So make sure when you're taking those off, you're doing it out this way, not pulling this way, because I'm guessing that's how that one got broken at some point. And all this will go back together pretty easily. And really, you should be checking this for functionality prior to getting this far back in the assembly, but I know this will work. As soon as you put power to these, they'll make a noise. So that's how you know they definitely do have power and they are to some degree functioning. So I'm gonna finish getting this back together and then we'll double check this door. So in testing the driver door, I've got one small issue. It closes, it pulls it in, the window goes down, the window comes back up, and I have an airbag fault. So I don't know what that's about, but the latch seems to work, but it seems to think that it's got some type of airbag issue, but I haven't done anything with airbags, unless there's something else that I left unplugged in there, in which I have to take it all apart again. So I will check that out, but that's how that's supposed to work, kinda. All right, I've got this resolved. Pulls in, window goes down, everything's good. Another thing that I noticed is when you go to open the door, it does it more aggressively. So sometimes I would have people to go to open it before and like it would pop it, but not enough to fully release it. So you have to do it again. This one seems to pop it out a little bit harder, so that won't be an issue. But now with this resolved, the solution. On the latch itself, in here, apparently in my trying to figure out what I was going to do to be able to use both cables, I moved that mechanism around a lot. And somewhere in there, it managed to trigger it so it always thought that it was open, even though it wasn't. Even with it flashed in completely, but it always triggered it. So I had to manually move that. And because I had the cable connected to the key over here, I moved the key and it flipped it over and then it started working fine. So that solved that. Now I'll also point out something else. With the key in there and the door not latched, it did turn. It had some resistance, but it did turn. As it turns out, the reason everybody hates those is because when you have the door in there, it doesn't turn. It's you break your key off trying to get it to open up. So for that reason, I've moved the cable back over to the manual release. So if you have it to where it's acting as mine was, like the door was still open, where the window won't go in the right spots, if you've got this connected, just give this a pull, and that should manually release this, so it'll realize that it's actually open, and then when you close it, it'll make it so it's actually closed. So that solves that portion of it. Now, the light for the airbag, that's another story. Now, what I believe has happened there is going to result in most likely a trip to the dealer to clear the error on the airbag. And the reason being, there are two yellow harnesses that are found on the seat belts, and those are tied in the airbag. Anything with a yellow harness or yellow tape, anything like that, are going to indicate that they are to the airbags. You have to unplug those, as I mentioned, to get the seat belts out. And I think at some point I turned the ignition on while those were unplugged. That gave a code indicating that there was no airbag, so it gives you the error. You can't clear those. I think only the dealer can clear those. So even though everything's connected back, you still get the code. I tried a battery disconnect overnight, didn't change anything, so that doesn't solve that. Now, my recommendation there would be that, one, you're watching this in its entirety prior to you actually doing the install, and that being the case, I would recommend disconnecting the battery before you do any of this. Open both the doors. Make sure you can leave everything open. You won't have to close it, use the ignition turn or anything. Prior to disconnecting the battery, make sure the windows are down also before you do this, because when you reconnect the battery, it's going to lock. So if you close the doors after you did the install, then connect the battery back, it's going to lock. So if you have the key fob in there or anything like that, you got a problem. So make sure your windows are down. And that'll do it. You can use Tesla soft close door parts. I picked the pair up for $107 shipped, as opposed to the thousands of dollars from McLaren. So they go in pretty easily. Just use these tips to make sure you don't run into any issues like I did. And you can do this very inexpensive with very few tools. And go check out my other videos for maintenance and upgrades, and I'll be adding on to those. So I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.